Hey everyone, and welcome to something a little different. It's the end of the year. Digital Foundry specializes in performance analysis, so why not look back across the last 12 months and analyze our own performance on YouTube? In the first of a series of videos, John, Alex and myself will be convening to cover a range of topics, and in this one we'll be looking at the most watched content we've produced this year, talking about the games, how we put all the videos together, stuff like that. So, well, how do we measure the success of each video? Well, YouTube prefers the metric of watch time, the amount of minutes the video generated, the amount that were consumed by you guys. These are stats that you don't have access to, and obviously they can vary dramatically, as you would expect. Obviously, the length of the video itself is a key factor in that. So in addition to that top 10, we have another top 10 based on traditional view counts, which of course you can see. And we're going to kick off with a video that was hugely successful for us in 2018, but was actually put together in April 2017. Yup, it's DF Retro, it's Metal Gear Solid 2. So John, why don't you tell us a little bit about this one? A 20-month-old video doing so well across 2018. It's pretty awesome, right?
Yeah, this was one of the ones I was very excited to do, and I'm happy to see that people are still watching it. I was kind of surprised with the reaction that it's still getting so many views. We're almost 2 years out from its initial posting, but this is, to me, one of the most impressive games on the PlayStation 2 and one of those ones that really showcased what it could do. And the thing that sort of pushed me to finally do it was I got basically all the supplemental material I needed. So I've already had the document of Metal Gear Solid 2, which is basically like a disc that's made for us, where it's a console disc, but it allows you to like browse all the models, all the sets, look at all the cutscenes, and just move the camera wherever you want, and just you can really like play around with all the assets. And I've never seen anything like that before, having a retail disc with that. They sold a separate disc called the Document of Metal Gear Solid 2. It's a standalone thing that you could buy at the store, and it's literally just a play with the assets disc basically, and it's amazing. And then I also picked up a copy of Metal Gear Solid 2 The Trailer, which is specifically that 60 FPS DVD. It's obviously interlaced, so it's 60 fields per second, but the effect is that it looks like 60 frames per second because, but it's a really nice quality version of that original trailer, and it has some making of stuff and some pre-release stuff. So I kind of felt like between that and all the behind the scenes stuff in there, I finally had enough footage to really build up a whole history of the game. And yeah, it was kind of fun to walk through that and look at the Xbox version. And for myself, looking back at it, there's some weird things. Like, this was before I had the GH5 camera, and I was still figuring out how to frame my shots. So like for my filmed inserts, I'm really close to the camera and I'm awkwardly lit and it's kind of grainy and it doesn't look amazing.
Oh man, I remember this trailer. Back in the day when I was producing cover-mounted magazine DVDs, we actually had a beta SP tape from Konami of this one. Pristine quality, pretty awesome. But, perhaps we're not done with Metal Gear yet. I mean, after all, Metal Gear Solid 3 and indeed Metal Gear Solid 2 are available on the NVIDIA Shield, and we've got the code, but we haven't really looked at it yet.
That's right. I meant to look at that at some point. I should probably go back and do like a clean up the Shield games. Like, where do we stand with Shield today?
Oh yeah, I don't envy you that one. I mean, the Shield, let's just say that the library is pretty spotty there. Okay, so yeah, Metal Gear Solid 2, brilliant video. I highly recommend you check it out. But let's move on now to number 9 in our top 10 of watch time. And we've got the Red Dead Redemption 2 tech analysis here. About 3.5 million minutes consumed there, 372,000 views. Interesting one, because you'd expect this one to be a lot higher, but we actually changed up some stuff behind the scenes here, which kind of explains what's going on here.
Yeah, so I guess, well, from our perspective on the production side, we kind of decided to make some changes on these big games now, just to sort of ease the production load, but also let people get what they want. So for Red Dead, I split out the performance and the tech analysis into 2 videos. And for this one, I just focused a lot of my effort on making something that was, I really just wanted to showcase the beauty of the game. Like, that's the reason I like to do these videos like this is, for me, it's like a celebration of what these developers have achieved, because you always get reviews and there's tons of those, but not a lot of reviews of the tech side of things, which I guess, that's what we do. So this is like a chance to step back and really appreciate it and look at all the little nitty gritty things and just like showcase, like, here's why this is cool.
Yeah, John, I really think this is something that's pointed out in the comments sometimes. You honestly sell games better than the developers do at times. And with the Red Dead, it's the way I think it was. Like, they had obviously those like videos that we analyzed beforehand, trying to figure out what was going on from the PS4 Pro footage they were throwing out. But it didn't look that spectacular. They were like holding back, or at least not showing what they could have. And your video just shows how much meticulous detail for rendering and animation and everything is in the game, which I honestly think beforehand I wasn't even excited. And then I loaded it up on my Xbox after you were talking about it, and it was just, wow, John's right.
Yeah.
But so that's one thing that I think we can take away from a lot of when you look exclusively at a game in one dedicated video. And I think this is a great way going forward. You can make a game look arguably better than developers do. And congrats, John. You're good.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I won't presume that I had anything to do with selling Red Dead Redemption 2. That was going to sell buckets, loads by itself. But yeah, that is kind of the thing. I really want to showcase the graphics, and I do think that the stuff in that video showcases it better than any of the trailers Rockstar's released, which is clearly just focused on just the storytelling.
Guys, come on. I think you're kind of underestimating the impact of those trailers. I mean, come on, it looked absolutely phenomenal. There was nothing like it. The excitement that was stoked there was absolutely huge.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But I have to admit, you've got a point there. It was a different focus to the kind of things that we look at here at Digital Foundry. And yeah, I think you did an awesome job with this one, John. Red Dead Redemption 2 will return in this top 10. But yeah, the tech analysis is at number 9. Now let's move on to number 8, which is God of War, PlayStation 4 exclusive by Sony Santa Monica. Another awesome game, another excellent video by John here. Actually, we might as well talk about this now, John, because we haven't really mentioned it in the past. But yeah, this is an interesting example of how a game arrives for review and something isn't quite right with it, something that we can highlight with our particular tools and skills, and we can deliver feedback to the developer and try to improve the game before it actually appears. So John, I think we can probably talk about this one now, can't we?
Yeah, I guess it's fair to say. I mean, the game has won many awards. It looks stunning. But when it was first sent to us in review code, I guess a couple weeks in advance, Sony's usually pretty good about sending out games early, which is awesome. And, it shows the confidence they had in it. Like, yeah, this is great. But when I first started the game, I immediately noticed that it wasn't smooth.
Yeah.
Basically, there was severe frame pacing issues and skipping and, like, tearing. Like, there was something wrong with the lock on the frame rate. And it didn't look right. And it was like this 100% of the time. And after having seen the preview stuff, I was like, this is not right. Like, it wasn't like this before. And so I guess we talked to Sony about it, and they actually, I was able to chat with some of the guys from the studio there and just sort of share our findings, show like a screenshot of the frame rate analysis stuff. And they, it was like a light bulb went off for those guys, I guess. And like, oh, okay. And they seemingly understood, like, okay, what they had done to cause that issue. And I think it was possibly related to implementing the PS4 Pro performance mode. Ooh. They may have I think this is just my memory, but I think it was something to do with the way they were syncing to the screen, and it was just a very, very simple change. So they did a quick little initial patch to test it out, and I tested that little patch and saw that, hey, fixes it completely. So before anybody got the game on day one, they had corrected that problem. And now the thing I haven't gotten to test in my theory is we had a digital code, and I don't have a disc of this yet. I need to, but I have a theory that the on-disc version is probably fine, because I think the version that we were first looking at review specifically mentioned that it added the PS4 Pro performance mode. So I think that when they patched that in, it broke the 30 FPS lock mode on the 4K and the regular PS4. Because if you ran in performance mode, there wasn't frame pacing issues. It was just unstable, because it is. Whereas if you wanted to play with a locked 30, you couldn't initially. But thankfully, they fixed it. All is good. And it kind of reminded me back of Uncharted 3 on the PS3 when that launched. The on-disc version had no motion blur.
Oh God, I remember that. Yeah, you're right.
Even though all trailers had motion blur enabled, and Uncharted 2 was great. I was like raising up a stink all over the place on like NeoGAF and such. And I guess one of those guys were like, I'll check with the team about this. And sure enough, it was just a little like thing that mistakenly got disabled, and they patched it up right away, and everything was fine.
It always does make you wonder, though, if it's something that's invading the screen the entire time, like a frame pacing issue, how it gets through. I mean, obviously, there's massively complex games, but like...
I mean, I think it's just when you're at the end there, and with the speed they were putting out patches, I can understand, like, there's so many balls to juggle at that point. So it's probably fairly easy to break something by accident. But thankfully, it's all good.
Interesting story though, and I really like the fact that we aren't just using our powers for evil. We're actually seeing a problem in the game before release, and we have the time to help the developer to get it right. So yeah, I'm really pleased about that, and I'm really pleased about the quality of this video as well, John. I really like the way that you this is another example of how you can really showcase a game and just make it look absolutely awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, let's talk about a couple of your techniques here in showcasing a game of this quality. So you have what you call, I don't know, it's like the virtual camera, isn't it?
Oh yeah, when I'm making the capture for these types of videos, I spend a lot of time pretending either that I'm like the virtual cameraman or that I'm giving an E3 demo. Like the idea is that I want to move the camera in very smooth, stable ways to give it like a really nice cinematic look. So lots of slow pans and very careful analog walking. That's just putting my character in just the right spot and like adjusting the camera so that everything looks really awesome. Basically, that's the whole point. Is it's trying to make the game look its absolute best.
This reminds me of some anecdote, but under a lot of my videos, sometimes I see you played the game with a controller. How dare you? You're playing PC games. But they don't realize that like sometimes you just need to set up a shot, and to do that with like nice, smooth, linear motion that doesn't like accelerate rapidly, you're gonna need a controller for that unless you're using some weird mouse, So like
exactly, that's what it's about.
That's why you see that in a lot of videos. Sometimes it's just trying to make the game look great.
Yeah, exactly.
So out of all the platform holders, Sony are kind of dominating this top 10. Something I want to point out actually before we move on is that you might be quite surprised to see God of War ahead of Red Dead Redemption 2 in our top 10 there. Obviously God of War came out earlier in 2018, and it's kind of been bubbling away in the background, people really enjoying the content. So yeah, the view count has obviously increased significantly across months and months, whereas Red Dead's only had a couple of months to really gain some traction. Okay, so let's move on to our next video here. It's actually another 2017 effort, but when you see the scale of the project here and the subject matter, yeah, you can kind of see why people are still watching this one, and the figures on this one, quite remarkable. 3.84 million minutes consumed of this one, 426,000 views, but this was a video that did indeed come out last year. So John, take it away.
Oh my goodness, this one, I put a lot of time into this. I think this was one of those videos I put like a full week, all day, just like jamming on, like going through every track and car and just like trying to find like all these points of comparison. I was doing a lot of the free camera, I guess in the replay mode, just like exploring the track, like zooming in on the details and just trying to see, appreciate what these guys that have designed these games have done. And it's kind of insane just how much detail there is in both titles. But, there's a lot of arguments back and forth over what looks better. That's part of the fun on the internet, I guess.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to like sit down and be like, okay, like here's a way. I didn't want to necessarily tell the people which one looked better. I just wanted to show the actual differences and let people decide. I don't think I came to a solid conclusion in the video, or more like I said, some things look better in one, some things look better in the other. But in the end, this is for you to decide which approach you like better.
I think this is pretty rare for us too in general, because we don't really look at similar genre games and then compare them. I don't think that's, other than maybe like a DF Retro where you talked about like water,
Yeah.
Like that's the only time I can really think of where we look at similar like genre or aesthetic pieces of a game and compare them across titles. And for this, it's just very, I mean, they're both the biggest names basically in racing games.
Yeah.
And it's something that people do on, forum and list wars all the time, but having your perspective on it, actually showing them back to back with these like pristine camera angles, I think it shows. I think people can come to the right decision there.
Yeah. And beyond that, I guess just to talk about a little like production stuff for me, like one of my favorite things to do when making a video, and I think Alex agrees with this, is for me, it's that intro, once I hear the right song and I start seeing the right visuals, it gets me very inspired to create these things. So I spent a lot of time on this one, just matching the visuals to the music and really trying to hype people up in a way. Like I think I was successful, and a lot of people have watched it. I'm curious to see what people think about that. But for me, that was like, that's how I got the juice to like really work on this video. I was like, all right, this is looking cool. I got some sweet shots in here. The music's just right. Let's do this.
I find this video really interesting, John. I'll tell you why. I mean, there's two different philosophies for producing the games here. Forza Motorsport 7. These guys budget for 60 frames per second from day one. I mean, I saw the game running in March when I went to see the Scorpio. I actually saw very early code of Forza 7. It had the dynamic weather in at that point. It was looking really awesome. It was on X hardware. It was still locked at 60 frames per second, 7-8 months before the game came out. This is the way that Turn 10 work. Now, obviously with GT Sport, we saw a big bunch of pre-production code there, betas and whatnot. And the performance was really ropey right up until launch, when suddenly it looked pretty awesome, not quite as absolutely locked to 60 frames per second as Forza, but I doubt many people will notice a huge upgrade from GT5 and GT6 on PS3, which were really quite lacking in that regard. So yeah, it's actually quite interesting to see that there are very different priorities here, but the end result, I mean, Polyphony Digital tend to concentrate on fidelity, but they pulled it off with this one. They actually came through with a really decent frame rate at the end as well.
Yeah, and if you play in the 1080p mode on the Pro, it is a perfect 60, and you get 60 FPS replays, which looks stunning.
It doesn't also change like the motion blur or something like that too, John?
Yeah. There's like a motion blur change as well. Like it's very interesting to look at them in that sense. But I think, looking back on them now, I would say I do think GT Sport, if I'm going to give my opinion, I do think GT Sport looks better overall.
Yeah.
And it comes down to some of the art design stuff, like their implementation of the lighting is unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's just so good. But then the other thing, and this is, I think I said this in the video, but the reason the cars in GT Sport tend to be a little more detailed and the material is a little bit more realistic, I think it just comes down to scale.
Yeah.
GT Sport has a lot less content than Forza 7. There are far fewer cars, and the Forza Motorsport guys have done an insane number of cars at a very high level of detail, where GT Sport guys, they're doing far fewer cars but at an even greater level of detail is kind of how it goes.
And it's not like they don't have infinite resources or something like that. They're both like well-funded studios. It's just like, we got to get this game out in time.
Yeah, but Polyphony Digital always seems to have that luxury of being able to work on their games until they're done.
Yeah, right.
Whereas I feel like Turn 10 is like, this is the first time they're getting an off year, I think, or next year.
Yeah.
They've been pumping out a new Forza game pretty much every other year without fail, and that's absolutely amazing that they're able to pull that off.
Good work on that video, John. It's been an absolutely storming success, done great numbers over the last couple of years. So yeah, I mean, praise be for the power of the photo mode. There's some absolutely amazing shots in there. Anyway, let's move on, and interesting one here. Wow, the PlayStation Classic review, 3.9 million minutes on this one from 361,000 views. And looking at the top 10 here, this is A bit unfortunate. I mean, I suspect that a lot of the success of this video was down to the fact that the product just wasn't particularly good.
Yeah, that's actually kind of a thing, and thankfully it's not too bad this year. But you know, when I'm making a lot of these videos, like for me, like I really like to bring positivity to this stuff, like just because, you know, just be a positive voice and showcase games at their best. But we also need to be critical when things let you down. I did that with the ARC video recently. But for this, you know, I mean, if something doesn't meet my expectations, I'm not going to pull any punches. That's just the reality of it, especially when you're talking like retro gaming stuff where I'm very, very, very particular. And the PS Classic was... I mean, it would have never become my main way of playing PlayStation games. I mean, I'm happy to use my original PlayStation with a PVM monitor. That's the way to go for me. But I at least had expected them to deliver an experience kind of on par with what Nintendo's done.
Yeah.
Their little mini consoles have been solid. They play the games well. But here, they picked a not so great emulator. They picked an old build of it. It seems to be running on Android. It introduces new performance problems in addition to the PAL stuff. The image quality is terrible. It's so blurry and nasty. Like everything about it is just not good enough as far as I'm concerned.
I think it's important to do that. You gave it a fair critical shake though. It's a long video. You weren't just like going out there being like, this is bad and throw it in the garbage as a joke. You went through everything and you explained, I think at the end very succinctly, and I've talked about it a lot since then, that the preservation of games as the way they were is very important. You know, like this medium doesn't have as much protection as film or, you know, like literature.
Well, when you say preservation, we're not saying that the PS Classic would preserve the games, but more like, the perception of old games.
Yeah, exactly.
Like if you haven't played a PlayStation in like 20 years and you pick up this thing and they're terrible, like the way they are on this little unit, you know, I could forgive you for thinking, oh, well, maybe this is just how it was. It's not very good.
Yeah.
But that's just because the device failed you.
Yeah, and it also it's semi disrespectful at the end to the developers who made those games that are great games.
Exactly.
You know? You want everyone to play the games the best the way they
Precisely.
can.
Well, it's not just being disrespectful to the people who made the games, but the people who made the hardware, the original PlayStation.
Right?
Correct.
I mean, this was seminal stuff. This was such an amazing piece of hardware for the time. It changed everything, and the concept that Sony wouldn't be looking after its legacy properly with a product like this, it just kind of baffles me. Especially when previous emulation of the system, be it on the PlayStation 3, be it on the PSP, which is pretty much flawless, the concept that 24 years on we can't get accurate emulation of the system just blows my mind. I kind of wonder what Ken Kutaragi would think of this and just how poor the product is.
Oh, I'm sure he does not like this device very much.
Oh, man.
And especially in the wake of those awesome little Nintendo boxes, this just really isn't good enough. And you know, people are saying, you could fix it with the hacks, you can sort out the PAL code issues using the hacks. Not for us.
Oh gosh,
this stupid thing, man. It popped up on YouTube channels like, hey, we just pressed the escape key, and it just so happened they were using the right keyboard in the right mode, or I don't know. So like I immediately tried all my like 7 keyboards at the house, none of them worked, and then it's like, oh, maybe it's these keyboards. So I took the PlayStation Classic to a store. And I hooked it up to like the monitor there, and I explained to guys what I was doing. I just like, they had all the keyboards out, you know, at a typical media store, like to test. So I just pulled out the USB cable, connected to the PS Classic, nothing. I mean, at best it was like you'd press the sleep button and the PS Classic would turn off, or you press the play button and it would go back to the menu, but it never actually would get into the emulator menu. And then people were like pressing select and triangle or something that didn't work. So I have no idea what's going on, but at this point it does seem like, you know, there's a lot more hacking going on in that thing anyway, so it's kind of a moot point now. But when it first hit, everybody was like, oh, this is interesting, and we weren't able to do anything on it for that reason.
Yeah, worth pointing out that we did want to cover the keyboard hack, we did want to cover the triangle and select hack, but none of them worked on 2 systems that we tried. I don't know whether it's down to the fact that we had European units, whether there is some kind of difference there, whether it only worked on limited units to begin with, I just don't know. Anyway, let's move on. We're going to talk about something infinitely more awesome now, and it's John's incredible retro video for Doom here, where every single console version was tested. Incredible work.
Yes, the episode on Doom, which has been, I think, the most successful, like, normal DF retro episode that I've ever made. And that is awesome to me because Doom is very important to me and very interesting. I mean, I might even say it's my favorite game ever. If I really look back at, I mean, I'm still playing it regularly. It's been around for a long time.
You and me both.
So, yeah, for me though, there was a time when getting Doom on a console was like the race that was happening. Every manufacturer wanted to say that we have Doom because it was the biggest thing on PC. And for me, like 90s ports from the PC to console are extremely fascinating because the PC was such a different beast and very different hardware. And like the hoops developers had to jump through to get these to work on the consoles, which again, very different. It's amazing to see what they came up with. And some of the results are really impressive. Others are not. But then others still have interesting stories behind them. Like the thing with 3DO port and Rebecca Heinemann and like how she was tossed into that awful situation, which meant I think she had like 6 weeks total or less or something to develop it. And the guys had lied about finishing the code according to her. Things like that. And then with the Saturn port, which the legendary Jim Bagley worked on that. And this dude, he's a very good coder. He's done amazing work. And he came up with a 3D accelerated version, apparently, using the Saturn hardware. But that means you get sort of the affine texture swimming. It's a little different on Saturn, but it's still kind of there. And so apparently, normally, I heard this on a podcast recently from John Romero. He said he was the one that would normally approve console ports. And he would have approved the Saturn version because he thought it was, that would have been great. But he was on vacation that week or like out of the, away from the company. And Carmack was there to do it instead. Who's very, he's very technically oriented, a little more picky. He couldn't stand it. And he told him he had to run it on the CPU and solve that issue. And it ran horribly.
Well, as you know, John, I was there. I am a contemporary eyewitness, and this game on the Saturn was just awful. And for people like me that were really championing the system, it was a massive letdown. It was unbelievably poor.
Yeah, as the editor of a Sega Saturn magazine, I'm sure it was very painful for that version to hit.
I mean, this could have changed the face of the mid-90s console war here. And didn't you say that it was running at 60 frames per second? I mean, that seems kind of unlikely since even the Xbox 360 version and the PlayStation 3, they sort of top out at 35, don't they?
Well, that's what Jim said in an interview. It's hard to say whether it really was or not. We've not seen it. It's possible that because some of these ports were running different forks of the engine or were modified in such a way that they ran differently. So it doesn't need to run like the PC version. Yeah, like the N64 Doom engine, it's a perfect 30, and that was I think John Carmack helped with another great programmer whose name I'm blanking. 'Cause I need to watch the episode again. They did great work on that. But yeah, for me, I'm just, I love looking at those ports of Doom, and I really need to find more games like Doom to do because I love seeing those huge variations in different versions.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, this is one of my absolute favourite DF Retro videos over the last couple of years. Just astonishingly good work. So let's move on then, and at the number 4 slot we have Marvel's Spider-Man, the complete tech analysis, 5.85 million minutes on this one, 522,000 views. Pretty astonishing stuff, and it's another Linneman project, so John, clue us in on this one.
Yes, another video. This was another big project, and this one was interesting because usually I go into these just like, okay, what can I show? But for this, I kind of came in with a story to tell in the sense that I wanted to get to the bottom of the Puddlegate stuff.
Yeah, John was just pinging me on Slack like over the weekend and the time before, be like, what's the difference, Alex, here in these puddles? What makes them so different? And we all talked about it for a while and figured it out. And it's kind of uninterestingly interesting. Like, it's actually not a big change. And the controversy is
Yeah.
It's like kind of manufactured. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we pretty much after hacking back and forth and talking to each other, and it was like, okay, they're still using screen space reflections combined with cube maps. They simply moved from using custom, parallaxed cube maps, like box projected cube maps for that specific room, to using more generic ones.
That's literally
which
it.
I believe, it's pretty much like a time saver, I'd say, when you're creating a large scale game, and possibly also memory if you're doing a lot of bespoke cube maps everywhere. That demo could have been a more restricted area just for the demo, so they'd have that budget to do that. But I really think it has more to do with just the art side of things. Like, okay, we can't really do bespoke cube maps for every little area because it's so time consuming. But that's it. Like, the underlying rendering is pretty much identical to that. It's just they swapped that art around. And I think the reason they also reduced the number of puddles in that scene really just has to do with, by doing that, and you have to fall back more on screen space reflections, and obviously they're more imperfect. So if you have a lot of water at the edges of the screen, you're going to see the SSR cut off, and it doesn't look great.
Yeah.
So I think that was adjusted for that reason.
Yeah, the whole reflection thing. I remember saying to you guys that, as soon as the embargo breaks, there'll be like a 24-hour window of interest in the reflections before people realise that, hey, this is a pretty awesome game, and maybe we should be concentrating on this incredible modelling, the incredible lighting,
absolutely,
animation. It's just a technical tour de force here, and the reflections kind of a bit of a non-issue.
I mean, it's just,
of all the things, you look at this perfectly rendered Peter Parker and this amazing animation, and for some reason people look at the ground like, what are they doing?
Hold on a minute, Alex. You're talking about people being interested in the ground and getting obsessed with reflections. We've just come back from the Eurogamer Christmas party, and I literally saw you staring at the ground and indeed the reflections in Super Smash Brothers. So what's going on there?
Oh my God, you're right.
That was mesmerizing.
You hypocrite.
Okay, moving swiftly on, we're going to be moving on to number 3 now, and again, people might be a little bit surprised that this isn't number 1, or indeed number 2, but Red Dead Redemption 2, the platform comparison. 6.47 million minutes watched here, 953,644 views. So this is an interesting one because, from a technical perspective, the tech analysis had a lot more time and effort put into it, but this obviously did a lot more views, even though it was much simpler to put together. I think the interest here is essentially that all of the pre-release marketing for Red Dead Redemption happened on PlayStation 4 and PS4 Pro. Nobody had seen anything on the Xbox build, so I think there was a huge amount of anticipation there.
Yeah, I think it was native 4K, and everybody was like surprised or like, wow, okay, this is great. I mean,
that's it.
It's not an unexpected thing, because we've seen a lot of games that were like native 4K on X, but then like sort of checkerboard 4K on the PS4 Pro. It's just that the way the checkerboard was implemented, combined with like the various post-processing and the temporal everything mentality, as we've said, they just didn't play nicely together, and the Pro version ended up looking significantly blurrier. And not only that, the X version runs the best.
Yeah.
So it's a stunning achievement on there.
Yeah, I think the other thing to bear in mind is that we actually went back and did another video afterwards, because the Pro has a native 1080p mode if you're running on a 1080p screen, which says to me that Rockstar didn't want to downscale that 4K presentation. They were happy just with 1080p as is, and you can kind of see that side by side. There's pros and cons for both of them.
Yeah, I actually do wonder why that is the case. I mean, I guess a downscale, technically downscaling the 4K reconstructed image would give you like greater subpixel accuracy, but you still see that like that hazy horizontal blur across the entire image that it has. But I kind of also dislike that in general. I don't like it when it's unintuitive to how your game's outputting to the display. And I think that's something that's generally done better on Xbox, because it's kind of like forced across the box itself, right?
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft's solution to this is really simple. They don't tell the developer what display is attached.
Yeah, right.
Which is the way forward, because it means that if you're going to be doing a performance mode or a 4K mode, both of them have got to be available regardless of what screen you have.
Well, to be fair though, there is one downside to Microsoft's approach, and that's with the HDR. on PlayStation 4 Pro, games can introduce a toggle for HDR within the game menu, whereas on Xbox, pretty much every game I've tested, at least, if you want to disable HDR, you have to do it from the system menu. And you'd want to do that in the case of Red Dead 2, as we discovered, since it has basically not good HDR.
That's so weird though, because if you look at the other way it's designed on Windows, which is probably an afterthought, that's why it's this way, but you toggle it in Windows, and then the games themselves usually have toggles themselves. They don't just start up usually in an HDR mode. You have to toggle it. So I wonder why that is the case for Xbox games. You would imagine you could just turn it off in game as well.
Well, I think they think, if a game supports HDR, you'd want to play it in HDR, but it doesn't take into account that some HDR implementations are bad.
Yeah, that's pretty much true, yeah. So, yeah, that was an interesting one, John. We just sat down and talked about the platform comparison there. It was just an insane reaction, I think. Insane in terms of the volume of traffic we got from that. And just astonishing, but probably not surprising. I mean, I remember saying to you beforehand, I know you put a huge amount of effort into that analysis, but this is kind of what people really want to see.
That's a funny point, because I think I spent 4 solid days doing the analysis video, and really pouring a lot of care into that. And then for this, I spent a day and a half. Most of it was just spent crunching through numbers, because to get our frame rate data, you have to select your clips, and if you want to compare it, you have to make comparable clips that are the same number of frames. Then you got to import them into our program, and then let that calculate, get all the grid stuff set up properly, which is it's like editing an XML thing, and then you export it, and then exporting can take a long time. Even on a very fast machine. And so there is a lot of waiting and number crunching and just, little adjustments to be made. So you can spend a lot of time doing that. So, Richard's help was extremely valuable in this case, because this allowed us to execute the vision of 2 videos for one game that allows people to kind of pick and choose what aspect they want to look at. So it kind of kept the console warring to one specific video, while the main appreciation analysis video was its own thing.
Yeah, it is really the way forward for us in the one to reduce workload on one person, which is, it can be massive, and also in the end it allows the viewers to choose what they want to see. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think another thing which is quite interesting, one of our colleagues was actually at Microsoft when our coverage dropped, and obviously it's a big win for them from a marketing perspective. They were scheduling calls, they were figuring out tweet schedules to kind of get this message across. Found that absolutely fascinating, because
they said when it dropped, everybody was like, what, surprised, and they're scrambling around to run with it. And to me, it's just wow, I didn't realize they were paying that close attention.
Okay, so let's move on. We're getting perilously close to the number 1 slot here, but this is number 2, and it's Crysis 10 years on. Why it's still melting PCs. 8.8 million minutes watched, 1.138 million views here. So Alex, I think it's fair to say that you have a healthy obsession with Crysis.
I'm not sure I would call it healthy.
I mean, I don't want to say how many hours I've spent in Crysis, or arguing about Crysis, or thinking about Crysis. I mean, it's right next to Turok, so let's put it right there. But for me, I've been thinking about it the last couple of days, because it surprised me initially when it came out. It's my 4th or 5th video, and production-wise, that's when I was just starting, and I was still learning so many things, both about what viewers want, how I want to present myself, the way I speak. And for some reason, in spite of all those flaws, technical flaws with the video, and there's a number, not the content, but the way I present it, it resonates with people. And I've been trying to think of the reason the last couple of days why that is. And I think there's 2 things. One, it's the mythological status that the game has. I think it is actually kind of a once in a lifetime thing.
Yeah.
Someone who just didn't care about what your PC is going to be like right now, and they just threw everything at it, and it looked absurd. and it still looks absurd. Like every single time you wake up in the plane, in the at the opening sequence when you're looking right at Jester, right? It's that looks almost like games these days, and that's really rare. Completely head and shoulders above its peers, and that's the legendary status of the game, which is kind of talked about in the title, which is like Richard. That's Richard. Richard's really good at giving something a title that makes it sound like something you want to watch, and that's like it's still melting PCs.
That's actually a great point, Alex. Right there is hats off to Richard for basically being the man that does all the titles and all that kind of, like, he's the one that pitches our stuff, and that's hard.
Yeah.
Like, I try to think about titles, and it's not easy.
I think what's really impressive about the Crysis thing, because we actually did a bit of collaboration on that, because I did the CPU testing on the 8700K.
That's right.
The melt sequence, as I called it.
The melt sequence, yeah. And we actually had quite a few sequences where we could make it dip under 60 frames per second on the Ryzen, but the 8700K was holding up okay. But then you saw Ascension, which as we know, they never brought that to the console versions, and we kind of now perhaps know why, because an 8700K at 5 gigahertz can drop to 35 frames per second.
it's something.
We have got to go back to that game and basically chart what it was like on the hardware of the time, the best hardware of the time, and then kind of maybe track it across the years to see at what point it actually became, a viable concern at 1080p. I remember, right back at the beginning of Digital Foundry in, 2009, 2010, we actually were trying to run the game at 1080p 60, which in retrospect, if an 8700K at 5 gigahertz is hitting 35 frames per second, because we're so CPU limited, what was I thinking? I should
weren't to know.
I should have just packed up and gone home. But the other thing I think it represents, which is one thing that I love about this 10 years on video, and also a lot of the DF Retro stuff, is that we use today's analysis methodologies to look back at the games of yesteryear and try and get some answers. So, you actually came up with a really good point in that video, Alex, which was that the race towards the highest settings completely disregarded the fact that the VRAM of the cards of the time just was woefully inequipped.
Yeah, only one GPU at that time could do it, and it was the one they designed the game with, the 8800 GTX, and no other card. Everyone was stuttering and probably didn't even understand why, because it wasn't just common knowledge at that point in time. I wish I could go back in time and argue on the internet with the information we have now, with the new knowledge. And another thing I wanted to talk about with it is it's mythological. It's like this awesome thing from the past, but it's something that we all, from people that played it, all can resonate with. And that's why John videos always have such positive reception, because these are things that everyone remembers and everyone had a point of contact with. Maybe they didn't play it, but their friend played it. They watched their friend play it at their house. Everyone remembers their first Doom experience. I think Crysis is a very similar way. Like,
it's one of those.
It's one of those things, and maybe one day, I hope it's coming.
And I just gotta say, well done on this one, Alex.
Oh, thanks.
I'm so proud that you were able to produce such an awesome video, and that it had such a great response. And yeah,
cheers, John.
This is why we love having added Alex to the team this year.
Yeah. There were so many funny Alex anecdotes that I shall tell one of them now. We had our Christmas party a couple of days ago, and Alex, we went into the DF set studio. And Alex said, "What's that over there?" And it was, and I said, "Alex, it's an 8800 GTX." And there was like a hushed awe, because that card was incredible for the time. Yeah.
Although, Alex, you did mistake that Sound Blaster card for a Fury S.
Oh, God, they're both small.
the red aluminum casing or whatever.
I mean, to be fair, they're both small and no one uses them anymore.
Yeah.
Oof.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, my God. Alex, it's usually you that pulls me up on my completely inappropriate jokes.
Yeah, it's just this weather. What can I say?
Okay, so number one on the list, the most watched video for Digital Foundry in 2018 In terms of watch time minutes, 9.88 million minutes, 427,000 views. This was an idea from John, but it was one that we all collaborated on. It was DF Retro Extra, the PlayStation 3 reveal at E3 2005, which, it's notorious, I'd say, wouldn't you?
To put it lightly,
Yes, this was this is one of the most infamous conferences in E3 history, since they basically promised the moon and then would go on to not deliver that at all. And yeah, it's kind of legendary, and it sort of, it really changed the way that generation started.
Yeah.
Because Microsoft was showing things pretty accurately at that E3, and then Sony kind of tried to blow that out of the water. And so the initial response to 360 was somewhat lukewarm. So when they stumbled out a year later with the issues that they had, it kind of actually, that conference inadvertently helped Microsoft, because it kind of, it made them look like the good guys, and, it really shined a really nice bright light on what they were doing that was already more mature at that point.
I've got to say, I'm loving these E3 press conference videos that we've done.
They're so fun, yeah.
We've just done the PlayStation 3 E3 2006 debacle, which will be running, I guess, early next year. And oh my word, when you compare when you compare, the kind of concepts they were showing at E3 2005, these incredible CPU-driven demos, this was the power of the cell, this was a vision for gaming, and then 2006, it's Ridge Racer and real-time weapons change and
US dollars,
599 US dollars,
and massive damage in more ways than one
to your brand image.
Yeah, but this was I actually found this really fascinating, because I had actually never seen the whole thing all the way through. So it was actually really interesting to kind of revisit that and see what Sony were actually doing. I think there was kind of pure intentions behind most of it, but and there was a genuine vision there, which was kind of more exciting, I think, than what Microsoft served up with the 360, which was kind of more utilitarian about, we're going to be doing social stuff.
Social stuff, right? Yeah.
And beyond the games themselves, Sony had a lot of talking heads out there and like really technical stuff.
Yeah.
Like really talking about the details of this hardware and what they were aiming for, and it was like, wow, okay.
Yeah, I think it would have been awesome if the IBM guy had rolled up at the Microsoft conference and said, so we developed the PlayStation 3 CPU from 2001, and then Microsoft came to us in 2003 and said, hey, can we have that CPU as well? That would have been a pretty awesome...
a little awkward for
a wonderful moment.
So, any more notes on this? I mean, this is another one that I really loved.
This is my first video, technically,
this is the first ever video that Alex was a part of.
Yeah, and all the comments underneath, who's this, weird guy? Why does he keep laughing?
Why does he like Turok?
I think we all know now. Yeah, why does he like Turok so much? All these things. For me, it was a big moment. I had just basically met up with Richard and John and discussed the future. Got some hardware, my little Ryzen here, and it means a lot to me. And I can't wait to do more of these in the future.
Yeah, that was a great video, and I really enjoyed working with you on that one, both of you. And this was a thing where we actually both went to John's house in Frankfurt to record that one. So we were actually in the room together. I think something which people don't understand, a lot of our dual VOs, and indeed this one, I'm in the UK, Alex is in Berlin, and John's in Frankfurt. So we use cunning mixing audio magic to make us sound like we're actually in the same room together, but I can assure you we're not. So, but this one we actually were, and I guess that added an extra dimension to it. So yes, DF Retro Extra, the PlayStation 3 reveal, E3 2005. This was, in terms of the amount of minutes consumed by our audience, that was our #1 video of 2018. However, another, I wouldn't say it's equally valid, but another metric for judging of success is views. So we're going to be listing the top 10 here, but there's a lot of crossover, as you can imagine. However, you can see why YouTube prefers watch time as a metric, because, let's say I posted a video which was, PS5 specs revealed, and then, Rick Astley rolls up.
Yeah.
There wouldn't be a lot of watch time, but there would be a lot of views. So, there are some interesting changes on this list. So, but again, you know, our number 1 video actually shifts down to number 7 there. And number 6, Alex, your anti-aliasing video. What is it and why do we need it?
We always need anti-aliasing. That's what it is.
Unless you're Nintendo.
Oh, cool. So here, beyond the fact that it's like a topic that you've heard a lot about always in your life and maybe you didn't understand, you know, anti-aliasing, and it's like a long kind of Latin sounding word or whatever. Like, this is something everyone wants to know about, but maybe they don't. But for me, also, this video is interesting because it represents something that I wasn't sure how I was going to come to DF at the time. And coming up with, like, John has DF Retro, you know, Richard covers hardware in a way that is unique to him. And I didn't have anything for myself. And so coming up with something with, you know, this is a lot of Richard's input on top of it, being like, okay, let's make a series out of this. Tech Focus, where I will look at specific rendering techniques or even just general topics and try. I mean, I'm not always successful. I realize that. I'm a little wordy. I know that. But just trying to break them down in a way that you can finally learn about what the hell anti-aliasing is. And I think it's that's why it did well, because it's an option in games since the dawn of, you know, 3D rendering almost, and not everyone always knew what it was and the reason why it worked. And I hope I got that across. I would like to go back though in time though and cover more maybe in-depth things that I missed there. Like, I didn't cover like coverage samples and, you know, what's another one I didn't cover? I just, you know, things like that. It's just a couple things I would like to go back for. Yeah.
I think there's some interesting points here, which is it is really important. Whenever we've done an article about anti-aliasing on Eurogamer, it's had massive views, and it is really important because when you don't have it, and you know, it can look really, really bad. And also, there's been a kind of several transitions of you know, what the best form of AA is. So it started with MSAA, I guess, as the you know, and it's still the brute force solution that gets great results. So you know, look at like Forza Horizon 4 using MSAA, and it looks incredible at 4K. 4K with MSAA, that's quite an achievement. And then, but obviously, when we looked at the last gen, the consoles just weren't properly equipped to do anti-aliasing, and then we had the rise of post-process, FXAA, MLAA. What happened to that?
Oh yeah.
Dead.
and then obviously this generation, it was still kind of FXAA, but then we had people like Ubisoft really pushing the envelope. Do you remember HRAA on Far Cry?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Which was kind of like a precursor to the AA with temporal components, and then it basically we're now full blown TAA.
Yeah, and if a game almost doesn't ship with it now, I think it honestly is a detriment to the visuals, because the way art is done these days, everything's so shiny, and high frequency. Like, you're gonna need something to smooth over a number of frames.
Yeah, that was always the problem. Was like specular aliasing is a serious problem, and just regular MSAA couldn't tackle it. Post-process AA couldn't tackle it. You really need this.
Yeah. Let's move on to a video that is in our top 10 views at 620,000, but wasn't at all in our watch time top 10, which is quite interesting, but when you see the game name, it all becomes clear. So, John, this was your Fortnite iPhone 10 versus Xbox One X comparison, which was a views magnet.
Yeah, this one is interesting. So I've made no secret I'm not a huge Fortnite fan, but I am a huge fan of tech and what Epic does with Unreal Engine. And this is, in retrospect, and even at the time, it was super fascinating to see how they would translate the entirety of the Fortnite experience to a phone. And not only did they do that, but you can play with Xbox consoles. Like, that moment when I was spectating myself, I was spectating my phone from the Xbox, and it's just like, this is crazy.
What?
But yeah, that allowed me to really get in there and make some unique comparisons that, you know, were very much like perfectly lined up, and you really get to see how the two versions compare. And, you know, obviously there were a lot of cuts made, but it still looks the part and it runs quite smoothly.
For production, though, I think it's really important to highlight for when we cover multiplayer titles, getting like for like images or even like for like performance comparison is really hard. you can just get shot in the face.
Very difficult.
Or, the game will just, like you get lag and you can't parse internet problems, necessarily connectivity problems, from performance problems always.
Yeah, I think producing this video is probably the breaking point where I decided I don't like Fortnite because, and it's my fault, sort of. I was just trying to get my comparison shots. And so I was coming up with routes I could take. I was literally just there to look at the graphics. I wasn't playing the game. And you're almost through. You've almost got your comparison, and then somebody comes along and shoots you in the face. And I don't know how many times I almost threw my phone across the room at that point, which I did not, thankfully. But and again, that's I'm not playing the game right, so hey, But still, if I wish I could put a big sign over my character, be like, graphics testing in progress. Although then probably people would come after me even more.
Yeah, probably, yeah. Well, there's kind of 2 points I want to make about Fortnite. First of all, because I've genuinely felt pity for you, I actually did the Android analysis.
Thank you.
Which was also a Switch portable analysis. So it was kind of like a full-on mobile head-to-head across several versions there, and it had the Xbox as well. And that was actually quite interesting, just to see, so many different systems, rendering the same content in, subtly different ways, but they're all viable. It's all pretty spectacular stuff. And obviously, actually Epic has just sent me an iPhone, so we can actually look at Fortnite running on iPhone at 60 frames per second, which I'm really excited to see, because it is...
That's crazy, yeah.
It is going to be just nuts, so I'm really looking forward to that. So yeah, I mean, I think the other thing, I think Fortnite is hugely important, because I predict a future where multi-platform games, unless there's some sort of compatibility issue, will always be cross-play. I just think the momentum is there. I mean, why shouldn't Battlefield players on PlayStation be unable to play with Battlefield players on the Xbox? Okay, so this is the top 10 in terms of views, and above that we have, perhaps unsurprisingly, Red Dead Redemption 2 platform comparison, which we talked about. And number one, Alex, you have stormed up to number one from number two. It's the Crisis 10 years on, why it's still melting PCs, which is, basically, you, I'm not going to say fapping, but I just did.
Oh, gosh.
I actually think it's richly deserved, because, and we've actually learned a lot of lessons from this video, and indeed the PlayStation 3 reveal, in that there's certain events, certain games, certain pieces of hardware that people have a real emotional attachment to, and if we share that emotion with people, and there's that commonality there, it just produces big results for us. And also, especially so with the PlayStation 3 video, we just had a great laugh doing it. Yeah. Which is something which we haven't really done before on the past in Digital Foundry, which I'm really happy to do.
Yeah, and it's also like passion projects too. This is my passion, John's passion, and we all share this passion of, playing games and remembering the past. That's what the PlayStation video is about as well. So that's the way it's going to be going forward, more of that. And I hope we get to do it again. It's also a little crushing. I'm not sure if I'll ever get a video like this again with such great views and great numbers and all these things. So the pressure's there, but
don't beat yourself up on that. Sometimes videos also can catch on. This one caught on because it's excellent. But then there's ones like, if you look back at our channel, there's a video that compares Need for Speed Hot Pursuit, or Need for Speed Most Wanted on PS3 and Vita, and that thing has so many views, and it just keeps popping up. It's like people are still watching that video, and I'm just like, all right.
They're not watching it for very long. Like, we're back to the watch time versus views thing. But yeah, sometimes we look at the YouTube analytics, the amount of views that for particular content in the last 48 hours, and always at the bottom is Need for Speed Most Wanted Vita versus PlayStation 3. And we're sort of saying to ourselves, why are people watching this? Why is it, what's going on here? Why are people watching this? There's so much more better stuff out there. And attempts to sort of figure out what's going on there, it just isn't really happening. But there are some, for example, John, your E3 video about Halo 2, the demo that never became a game, that's probably lurking just outside the top 10 there. It did massive numbers there. So there's a lot of topics where you're kind of just genuinely surprised. But I think we understand why that Crysis video did so well, and I think we understand in a good way how we can do more stuff that's like that. But we're not sort of specifically trying to do that because it's successful. We're going to have fun with it. It's going to be entertaining to watch. So yeah, I guess that's a lesson that we'll be taking into 2019.
It's great that pretty much all these videos or a lot of these videos are passion projects. Like for me, the Doom one, the MGS2 one, for Alex, the Crysis one, like the fact that those passion projects became top videos is awesome. Because it shows that people enjoyed it, and it lets us do more of what we love, basically.
Yeah. And it is infectious. The Crysis video I got involved with just because, just how suboptimal was it? How much can you power past the game's issues?
Dude, by the time I was done with that video, I literally had the ladder down. I was up in my attic looking for my old PC parts.
There will be more Crysis in 2019. We're not going to be able to stop Alex from doing it.
The evergreen, and I'll come back. Yep.
Okay, so I think we're going to wrap this one up here. Thank you so much for joining me on this one. I had a real laugh looking at all of that content. And, I guess it's also nice to do performance analysis on ourselves for once, rather than critiquing the software industry.
Yes.
So yeah, happy to share all of those numbers and some behind the scenes stories. Yeah. So yes, please do like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Ring the bell as always for instant notifications whenever a new Digital Foundry video drops. Thanks so much for joining me on this one, guys.
Oh, thanks, Richard, and Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays to everyone.
Okay, right, we're going to leave. We're going to leave that there. See you in 2019.